Okay, class, chapter 20, part 4, as I said in the last slide on part 3, we're now talking about state workers' compensation laws. So these are state laws, and what happened many years ago was that before workers' comp laws, if you were injured on the job, your only recourse was to sue the employer. This was viewed by state legislatures at one point as not being very good approach to the problem of job injuries. It was not good for the employee because the employee basically had to sue the employer and then might lose their job. It was difficult to prove that the employer was at fault because you had to prove fault, and that might take experts a lot of money. If it wasn't a real serious injury, it might not be worth the money, and so there was a lot of drain on the assets of the employee. For the employer, it made them extremely vulnerable to more serious injuries and having to pay out a lot of money in damages which might actually cripple the employer. So what was created was an insurance type of policy where employers who have more than a certain number of workers have to buy workers' comp insurance or have to be self-insured. Okay, I believe in Georgia it's if you have 3 or more employees you have to be covered by workers' comp. By the way, this is another reason why people try to avoid having employees and instead have independent contractors, because independent contractors would be in a different situation. Okay, so it's an administrative process. If a worker is injured on the job, then they report that to the employer. They have to go to a doctor who is on the insurance that the employer covers, except in some exceptional circumstances where they're allowed to go to their own doctor. The benefits are health care and rehabilitation until they're rehabilitated, a stipend for lost wages, and if it's a permanent injury, a one-time payment for that permanent injury. Each type of permanent injury carries a special amount. So for example, if you lose the loss of your left hand, there is a dollar amount that the law provides that you get for the loss of that. Okay, so all states have adopted workers' compensation. And as I said, the benefits are health care, wages, and permanent injury. The more claims that are made against an employer, the more they have to pay into the for insurance. It's just like any other insurance. If you have a lot of automobile accidents, your policy costs are going to go up. There are some areas that are not covered. Those include domestic workers, agricultural workers, temporary employees, and employees of common carriers. Minors are covered. So the injury that occurs is an important area to talk about. The injury does not have to be one that's no fault of the employee. Okay, in other words, if the employee is negligent, they're still covered. Okay, that would not have been true under regular tort law. Okay, exceptions to that are intentional injuries, injuries caused with the worker was under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Okay, so that's a good benefit for employees, especially employees that work in places like factories where the slightest bit of negligence can cause a injury and sometimes a serious injury. Okay. Now, the employee who's injured, their exclusive remedy is unemployment, is workers' compensation. They cannot bring a lawsuit against the employer. That's the benefit that the employer gets. Okay. Now notice that there are exceptions to that. If they're injured by the intentional acts of the employer, then that is not covered and they can sue the employer. Another exception, be careful here. If you're going to be working in a law office, or even if you're an employee that is injured on the job, it only applies to the employer's liability for what happened. What do I mean by this? Okay, if you're driving a truck for your employer making deliveries and you have an accident, and the accident was caused by a faulty brake system by the manufacturer of the automobile, you can still sue the manufacturer of the automobile as well as your workers' comp claim. So you may have two claims. The injury occurred while you were on the job and you were injured by a defective product. Okay. Income security. Everybody knows what Social Security is. Social Security was adopted during the FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration in the 1930s. It was meant to provide a bottom level of income for people when they retire. Workers pay into the Social Security system, and then at old age, you are entitled to receive a certain amount of monthly payment. What a lot of people don't realize is that there are other Social Security benefits as well. There is a spousal benefit, and that is if you didn't have enough work record to qualify for Social Security, but your spouse did, you may be able to get spouse's benefits. There's also children's benefits if a parent dies up until a certain age. That child receives a benefit. And finally, and probably one of the most important additional benefits, is a disability benefit. If you've worked long enough to be covered by Social Security and then you become permanently disabled, you can collect a monthly Social Security disability check. Supplemental security income is similar to Social Security, but it's for people who do not have enough work record, that did not pay into the Social Security Administration long enough to qualify. The benefits are much less, but there's still a old age benefit and a disability benefit. There's also one for children who are poor and disabled. Medicare is another federal program. We all know what Medicare is. It's a medical program for people who are retired and over 65 years of age. You pay into the program, and then when you retire, you have a certain amount of health insurance coverage. It also kicks in if you become disabled after a certain period of time. I think there's a 2-year waiting period for that when you become disabled. Okay. So Social Security is something that is paid by the worker and by the employer. Again, if you're self-employed, then you're going to pay the full amount of your FICA or Social Security payment. Okay, that ends part 4 of chapter 20.